Now on to the second part of our tutorial, where we will start our case setup here, our case prep for our motherboard. So we had to get 2 aftermarket fans because this case only comes with 1 fan. So we had to get a couple fans so that way we can pull in that nice fresh air from the front, so we got good airflow. So let's crack open our case here. I've never had a chance to work with this case before, so see what the first impression is. Came out of the box pretty nice. And she's on her back right now, so let's flip her right side up. That way she's sitting the correct way. All right, and glass looks to be in good order. Well, I'm actually really liking this case. First off, has a good first impression here. Here's a good view of it. So here's the front. This is the mesh panel where we're going to draw in our nice cool air with our 2 120mm fans, and you even get a nice little blue RGB strip right here. We also have for a top mount, and you also get a nice dust filter, and there's also a dust filter through the front, and we also have our nice tempered glass, which we're gonna keep the plastic on, that way we don't get any scratches while we're working on the case. We're gonna take off this glass panel. Set this off to the side here. Just put it right here up against the table. And we're also going to remove the back panel so we have access to all of our cables. And boy, that is really on there. So sometimes you need to have a screwdriver because these screws, they put them on just a little too tight, so we'll get it started. Set all our screws right over here. That way they're all in one spot. We're going to take off the side panel. I'm going to rest it down here. Now we have everything we need to work on. So now that we have our back panel off, we now have a chance to see, these are all of our front panel connectors. We're just going to take off this little twist tie here. So you have your USB 3.0, your front panel audio and all that stuff, and your Molex cable for your LED RGB light right there. Now in this bag, you're going to find probably a few zip ties, some cheap black zip ties, which, if you don't have any Velcro straps or anything like that, you can use these for nice cheap cable management. Gets the job done. However, though, if you do need to move them or work them again, you're going to have to buy more. So these are for your 3.5-inch hard drives, your standard mechanical drives. These are all labeled. These are for your solid states, and these are the standoffs and screws for your motherboard. And we also, if you so choose to, most people don't do anymore, the little speaker for when you have an error code on your boot. You could put that in. Most people don't. We don't do it anymore. All right, so we have all our front panel connectors. The first thing we're going to do though is we're going to install our fans in the front, as we don't have any and we want to get adequate cooling in our case here. So what we're going to do is right under here, on most cases, not all, there's going to be a spot where you can put your hand right through and just grip this front end here. It should just snap right. Should just snap off just like so. And then you're just going to pull it down. And you could just set it down right here so that way our cables, you know, you can just let them just sit right there for right now. Just get it all nice and flat. Now to note, there is, right inside here, there's a couple of clips. You can undo this, so there is a screen in here so that you can undo this, and there is a filter right there, so that way you can clean the filter after it gets to be, you know, too much dust. So went with these, you know, just because once again we're on a budget, so we're gonna want something good. And I haven't used these before, but when I was looking at how much airflow they can put out, it was actually one of the highest ones. These put out 62.6 cubic feet, you know, a minute. So this is going to be nice. It's going to be good, solid airflow, pushing that cold air right into our system, which is exactly what we want. It's not RGB, it's an LED. So it's just going to be a blue solid LED. So it's going to give us a little bit of show. It's not going to give us a whole lot, but it's better than not having any at all. So in our box, we'll find our fan, as well as our 4-pin connector that's going to hook up to our system fan header, as well as the 4 included screws to mount our fan. So we're going to get our handy fan right here. We're going to put it in through the backside, and we're also going to want to make sure we have this cable here that's facing the top, so that way we can feed it through one of these holes here on the side, so that way we can do some cable management. We're going to take one of our screws and just thread it just a little bit, just enough just to get it in there. Gonna take our handy dandy screwdriver, turn it just a few times, just so it's just not gonna fall out. And then we're gonna go to the opposite corner, thread it just a tiny bit, take a screwdriver. Now we're gonna just make sure it's tight. You don't have to put a lot of torque on this, you know, like you're working on a car or anything. We're just gonna get them so that they just bottom out. Yep, and then it stays there, and then we'll just get the other 2 screws in there. There we go. And then we'll get the other one in there too. All right, get our second fan. Once again, to make sure it's kind of facing like this, that way the cable can come out the side here, and we can get some nice way, do some easy cable management. Let's get it started. Come back to the opposite corner. Then we'll just go all the way. When you get the opposite corners, it makes it really easy to hold it in place. Now it's in place. Now we can just thread the rest of them in there. And there we are. We are now done with the front panel part. So now we can pull our cables all back through. Make sure that's all good. And we're gonna line up the pegs. And there, she's all snapped back into place. So the next part, this is where our exhaust fan is. We also have a filter down here. This is our power supply basement. But the next thing to do is we're going to make sure our standoffs are all lined up for our motherboard. So the next thing we're going to do is check to see if our standoffs line up. So we're going to grab it by our cooler here, and whenever you're going to orient this, always have your peripherals faced out towards the back end of the case. And we're going to put it in at a 45-degree angle. And we still need to put in our IO shield, but we are just going to line it up right here. See, we have it one here, 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 as well as here and there. So all of our standoffs line up correctly. Another good way to tell if your standoffs to get the basic alignment for it is sometimes in the case, see how it says mini ITX and micro ATX? It is 1 and 2. These are numbered 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and 2. So that can kind of give you a general guideline for how the standoffs are going to fit. Obviously, there's other 2s here because there is some other variants that it's accounting for. So some motherboards you may have to move them around a little bit in order for them to fit correctly. So the next thing we actually need to do before we put our motherboard in is we're going to install our IO shield. So what you're going to want to do is when you look at the IO shield, this is the side that's going to be facing the back side of the case, is you typically want to put the audio ports facing down. That is 9 out of 10 times how your motherboard will lay out. You're going to want to slide it in here, and don't be afraid to give it a little extra push, but you're going to want to snap her into place there. Sometimes you got to get a little force with it. Most times it's pretty easy, but sometimes she'll give you a little trouble. And just make sure all the edges are all popped out and all the, there we go. And she is installed. So you guys can have another view. This is what it will look like when it is installed correctly. You'll have just a little bit of that lip on the outside of the case right there, just like that. So the next thing we're gonna need is gonna be our screws that come in the standoff bag. And there's 2 different kinds of screws. This is not the screw you're gonna wanna use. How it has this nice kind of a socket top. You're not gonna wanna use that. You're going to want to use this one that has the nice or rounded head on it, just like that. So we're going to take our motherboard by the cooler. We're going to kind of hold it at a little bit like a 45-degree angle and just kind of slide her on in and line up with the IO shield, all the peripherals, and make sure that our motherboard standoff that has a little tiny nipple on it is lined up, and that all the screws are lined up, which they are. And now we're going to get our motherboard screws. So we're going to take our Phillips head screwdriver and start going down on these screws for our motherboard. Now you don't want to tighten these too hard, because if you ever have to untighten these, one, you don't want to ruin your motherboard by over tightening, and the other thing is you don't want it to come off with the standoff, because that would be bad. You just want it nice and snug. It's just gonna hold it there. Once she's nice and snug, and if possible, always try to use a magnetic tip with your Phillips. That way you can kind of just feed them on here. Mine's kind of old, so it's getting kind of used a little bit, but it will get the job done. Make sure that one's tied down. Okay, everything's all, motherboard is in place. We'll just double check our screws here. They're all not torqued down, I just loosely torque them in. Just barely get them so they just stop. So once again, you have a standoff here, 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 and right here by the CPU power. So the next thing that we'll do before we put it in our power supply is we're going to rotate the case back up, and we're going to plug in our USB, our front panel connectors, and get all that set up before we start routing everything in here. So here we are looking at the back of the case. So we're going to take our front panel connectors, okay, and we have our LED, which is a Molex, which we need the power supply for, so we're going to leave that one out. So we have our other front panel connectors right here and here, our audio, our USB 3.0, and we're going to take them and route them all through right here. And then we're going to rotate the case. Make sure all the cables are through. It's a fan cable, fan cable. Okay, and we're going to turn like so. This way we have access, and this is where they're gonna come from. Actually, you know what? I'm actually gonna reroute these, and I'm actually gonna route them from the bottom. back better from the bottom. There you go. All right, now we have all our cables pulled through. We can start putting them in one by one. Okay, so the first one we're going to do is definitely going to be the easiest one. This is the USB 3.0 connector for the front. And you see how it has this little tab down here. And you will also see the little tab right down there. And so we're going to line up the tab facing towards the CPU. And make sure you plug it in nice and straight, as we do not want to bend any pins. Make sure it's nice and snug in there. Okay, the next one we're going to do is going to be our audio, which is going to be right back here. So we're going to take our little audio cable, and you see how there's this one that's blocked off right here, and down here there is one of the pins right there that is missing as well. So you know exactly how to line this thing up. So we'll go around our USB, make sure it's facing the correct orientation, which is this way. And just make sure that she's she's in there nice and tight. All right, now that we got our audio hooked up, we can now do our USB for the USB 2.0 in the front, which is going to be right, it's either one of these. Both of those white one, both this white one or this white one, is they're both USB. So once again, you have where the pin is not there, and same thing up right here in the corners here and here. So we're gonna wanna make sure it's in the correct orientation, and just make sure that you come in as straight as you can, and just slowly push her down so she gets nice and snugly in there. We're gonna push this guy kind of down a little bit, because these next ones will get a little tricky here. So we have all of our power switch and everything like that we are going to hook up next. So everything we're going to be hooking up to is going to be right here on our front panel. So this front panel is pretty easy. You're only going to have 3 cables to actually go on the front panel. You're going to have your hard drive LED. You're going to have the power switch as well as a reset switch. So the first one we're going to do is we are going to, you want the plus to face back towards the power supply, or, you know, the exhaust fan. So right here, these bottom 2 pins, this is where we're going to put this, and we're going to put it so that the plus faces back towards the power supply, because that's what the manufacturer calls for. So we're just going to plug that guy in just like that. The next one above it, directly above it, will be the it's actually going to be above, and 2 pins over will be the power switch. So you go over to the next set of pins, and we will also put that guy right there. And right below him is the reset switch. So make sure he's all plugged in, he's plugged in. And sometimes even I have hard times getting these guys to come in here because it is, so as you can see, this is the power switch. This one here is the hard drive. And we're going to go right below the power switch for I'm actually going to disconnect this power switch, and I'm going to do the reset switch first since it's on the bottom. Make it a little easier on myself here. Just like so, and then there, just like so. And I unplugged the USB 3.0 so that way you guys could actually see down here. So this is what it will look like when you have it all, the three little ones. You'll have the hard drive here, you have the power switch, and then the reset switch on the bottom. And now we're going to plug back in our USB 3.0. Just like so. Just like that. So the next thing we need to do for our build is we're going to pull our cables through and get any of the excess, so that way it won't be as, messy later down the road. Pull these through. Pull that one. Where's that guy at? He's kind of going through. And the USB 3.0, I always leave a little curl like this just because I want to make sure I got a nice straight connection. I don't want to pull it through and give it an awkward bend and not have a good connection. So don't worry about the cables if they start looking like that, because we're gonna start tidying up here in a little bit, so no need to worry. We still have our one Molex cable. This is for our LED in the front. We have our 2 fan cables, and we also have our other fan that is the exhaust fan that's still on this side of the motherboard. So the next thing we can do is our power supply.